I watched the policeman put Zach and the other three boys in the car. Driving away, he turned on his siren and red light, which seemed unnecessary, but I guess he didn't want to disappoint the audience on the sidewalk. I sat in the truck like I had frozen, and the world had frozen around me. The crowd faded away, and all the cars downtown went home one by one. People closed up their stores. I stared through the windshield as if I was watching the test pattern that came on television at midnight. After the shock wore off some, I tried to think what to do, how to get home. Zach had taken the keys, or I might have tried driving myself, even though I didn't know gears from brakes. There wasn't a store open now to ask to use a phone, and when I spotted a payphone down the street, I realized I didn't have a dime. I got out of the truck and walked. When I got to the pink house a half hour later, I saw August, June, Rosaline, Neil, and Clayton Forrest gathered in the long shadows near the hydrangeas. The murmur of their voices floated up into the dying light. I heard Zach's name. I heard Mr. Forrest say the word jail. I guessed Zach had called him with his one phone call, and here he was, breaking the news. Neil stood next to June, which told me they hadn't really meant all that "don't you come back" and "you selfish bitch" that they'd hurled at each other. I walked toward them, unnoticed. Someone down the road was burning grass clippings. The whole sky smelled sour green, and stray pieces of ash flicked over my head. Coming up behind them, I said, "August?" She pulled me to her. "Thank goodness. Here you are. I was about to come looking for you." I told them what had happened as we walked back to the house. August's arm was around my waist like she was afraid I'd kneel over again in a blind faint, but really I had never been more present. The blue and the shadows, the shape of them against the house, how they looked like certain unkind animals, a crocodile, a grizzly bear, the smell of Alka-Seltzer circulating over Clayton Forrest's head, the white part in his hair, the weight of our carrying strapped around our ankles. We could hardly walk for it. We sat in the ladder-back chairs around the kitchen table, except for Rosaline, who poured glasses of tea and set a plate of pimento cheese sandwiches on the table, as if anybody could eat. Rosaline's hair was done up in perfect cornrow plaits, which I guessed May had done for her after supper. "Now, what about bail?" August said. Clayton cleared his throat. "Judge Monroe is out of town on vacation, so nobody is getting out before Wednesday, it looks like." Neil stood up and walked over to the window, his hair cut in a neat square at the back. I tried to concentrate on it to keep from breaking down. Next Wednesday was 5 days from now. 5 days. "Well, is he all right?" asked June. "He wasn't hurt, was he?" "They only let me see him for a minute," said Clayton, "but he seemed all right." Outside, the night sky was moving near us. I was aware of it, aware of the way Clayton said he seemed all right, as if we all understood he wasn't but would pretend otherwise. August closed her eyes and used her fingers to smooth out the skin on her forehead. I saw a shiny film across her eyes, the beginning of tears. Looking at her eyes, I could see a fire inside of them. It was a hearth fire you could depend on. You could draw up and get warm by if you were cold, or cook something on that would feed the emptiness in you. I felt like we were all adrift in the world, and all we had was a wet fire in August's eyes. But it was enough. Rosaline looked at me. I could read her thoughts. "Just because you broke me out of jail, don't get any bright ideas about Zach." I understood how people became career criminals. The first crime was the hardest, but after you're thinking, what's one more? A few more years in the slammer, big deal. "What are you going to do about this?" said Rosaline, standing beside Clayton, looking down at him. Her breasts sat on her stomach, and her fists were planted against her hips. She looked like she wanted all of us to fill our lips with snuff and go directly to the Tiburon jail and spit on people's shoes. It was plain Rosaline had fire in her too. Not hearth fire like August, but fire that burdens the house down if necessary, to clean up the mess inside of it. Rosaline reminded me of the statue of Our Lady in the parlor, and I thought, if August is the red heart on Mary's chest, Rosaline is the fist. "I'll do my best to get him out," said Clayton, "but I'm afraid he's going to stay in there a little while." I reached into my pocket and felt the Black Mary picture, remembering the things I'd planned to say to August about my mother. But how could I do that now with this terrible thing happening to Zach? Everything I wanted to say would have to wait, and I'd go back to the same suspended animation I'd been in before. I don't want to see why May needs to know about this, said June. It will do her in. You know how she loves that boy. Every one of us turned to look at August. You're right, she said. It would be too much for May. Where is she? I asked. In her bed asleep, Rosaline said. She was worn out. I remembered I had seen her that afternoon out by the wall, pulling a load of stones in the wagon, building onto her wall, as if she sensed a new addition was called for. The jail in Tiburon did not have curtains like the one in Sylvan. It was concrete block gray, with metal windows and poor lighting. I told myself it was an act of stupidity to go inside. I was a fugitive from justice, and here I was breezing in a jail where there were probably policemen trained to recognize me. But August had asked if I wanted to come with her to visit Zack. How was I going to say anything but yes to that? The policeman inside had a crew cut and was very tall, taller than Neil, and Neil was Wilt Chamberlain size. He didn't seem especially glad to see me. Are you his mother? He asked August. I looked at his name tag, Eddie Hazelworst. I'm his godmother, August said, standing very erect, like she was having her height measured, and this is a friend of the family. His eyes passed over me. The only thing he seemed suspicious about was how a girl as white as me could be a friend of the family. He picked up a brown clipboard from the desk and plopped the fastener up and down while he tried to decide what to do with us. All right, you can have 5 minutes, he said. He opened a door into the corridor that led to a single row of 4 jail cells, each of them holding a black boy. The smell of sweaty bodies and sour urine almost overpowered me. I wanted to bring my fingers up to pinch my nose, but I knew that would be the worst insult. They couldn't help that they smelled. They sat on bench-like cots hooked along the wall, staring at us as we passed. One boy was throwing a button against the wall, playing some kind of game. He stopped when we came by. Mr. Hazelworth led us to the last cell. Zack Taylor, you got visitors, he said, then glanced at his watch. When Zack stepped toward us, I wondered if he'd been handcuffed, fingerprinted, photographed, pushed around. I wanted so much to reach through the bars and touch him, to press my fingers against his skin, because it seemed only my touch that I could be sure all was actually happening.